Hey, welcome everyone. We're gonna read our opening sutra. Um,
Suppose penetrating and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to, remember and accept. I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's teaching.
and now this is our Dhamma statement. In Buddhism, when Zen practitioners share their understanding of the teachings and practice, it is offered freely as a practice of dana paramita. Dana is a Pali word meaning generosity or to give freely, and this practice is done without expectation of getting something in return. This is the spirit of speaking about the Dharma. Other ways to practice dana is to offer support to those who share the teachings, to support places of spiritual practice, and to give without judgment or expectation when opportunities arise. Those who share the teachings at Great Tree do so on a dana basis. Please support their practice by giving what you can. You can either do this directly or through Great Tree, and we will pass it on to them. And today our speaker is Liliane Myoren Papin. And she is a Franco-American writer and teacher of Chinese medicine, which she describes as an ecological medicine particularly suited to our times. She practices and teaches acupuncture, herbology, qigong, and dietary therapy. She presently resides in France, and she has written books such as The Treasures of Chinese Medicine for Today's World and The Great Book of Daoist Medicine. Welcome. And welcome to your kitty. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you. So should I start?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to share the screen, and I have a short presentation, a short PowerPoint to guide me and guide us. All right, so let's see. There we go. Slideshow. We're going to start from the start. So I was very impressed by the artwork for the acid rain, our liver forest. It certainly does convey the fire of acidity. So, okay, give me just 1 second here. It will do. All right, so what my goal is in this little exchange that we have today is to deepen something that some of you by now know very well in terms of what I call the wheel of medicine, the Daoist wheel of medicine. I come back to it again and again, partly because Tejo did ask me to give a talk with each season, so it's perfect in terms of the seasons. And also because it's a great opportunity to see how deep that wheel of medicine is, and also to draw some really interesting links between Daoist medicine or tradition and Buddhism. Really, they interconnect completely. So this one is about the spring, which corresponds to liver in Chinese medicine, liver and gallbladder. And I thought this is a great opportunity to deepen interdependence and see what I call interdependence in action. And certainly that's something I constantly remind myself. It's one thing to know something, and we all have that experience, I think, to know something intellectually or to be fascinated by it, and another thing to apply it in everyday life. And so interdependence, and emptiness, we hear about it, we talk about it, at least I should say for me, in terms of Buddhism. But in everyday life, it's, again, easy to forget. And I think this wheel of medicine is a great practice in many ways of interdependence and what Thich Nhat Hanh calls interbeing. We, again, in many traditions, we say we are all one, but not but, and what does it mean in our everyday life, in our everyday practice? So that's as well, it's as much for me as it is for you, because, we're all in the same boat of deepening practice. So that's a good opportunity. And today, because I have done this wheel of medicine in many aspects, today I chose to focus on one aspect of the Daoist wheel of medicine, which is acidity as or sour as the taste that corresponds to liver energy, and see a bit what does it mean and what can we draw from that. So in terms of interdependence, it's something that we find in many, many traditions, and certainly in poetry as well. So I took one example from Rumi, the Sufi poet from Persia, 13th century. Many of you, I'm sure, know him, and someone I really enjoy his poetry. So here is what he wrote: everything is one, the wave and the pearl, the sea and the stone. Nothing exists in this world outside of you. Seek deeply in yourself what you want to be. Since you already are everything, the history of the whole world lies dormant in each one of us. And everything is one. So, here it probably would be a topic better for Tejo than for me, but some of my reflections on emptiness is, I think it's a word that we use because we lack a word for it. And emptiness can also be said as fullness. There's no difference, emptiness or fullness or full potential, since there's nothing that is that exists by itself. But anyway, I just want to share the poem, which I think is very beautiful, and that expresses that interdependence. William Blake is another poet who expressed the same thing: to see a world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wild flower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. And I know that I have played with the world in a grain of sand. And indeed, when we start thinking about what a grain of sand is, we do reach the stars, the beginning of the universe. Everything is in a grain of sand. So that's, again, that notion or that concept of interdependence all around us and in us. Thich Nhat Hanh, also, of course, the understanding of interbeing is very important. It helps us to remove the illusion of loneliness and transform the anger that comes from the feeling of separation. You carry Mother Earth within you. She is not outside of you. Mother Earth is not just your environment. And sometimes I think, with ecology, we do fall into that separation. Like, nature is outside of us. We protect nature. But the truth is we are within nature. In, in, in that insight of interbeing, it is possible to have real communication with the earth, which is the highest form of prayer. To be is to interbe. You cannot just be by yourself alone. You have to interbe with every other thing. So, coming back to our wheel of medicine, which I know some of you have seen many times by now. So we are here in the green dot of liver gallbladder, which is called either wood energy or liver energy. You see also that there's element, I don't like too much as a word, but let's say an energy that's with it, a sound that corresponds to it. So in terms of wood is shouting, emotions like anger and resentment. We're not going to go too deep into that because we have several times and there will be other opportunities, hopefully. But, when we say, for example, that anger is the emotion that corresponds to liver, it's both true and untrue, meaning as medicine evolved and modernized, there's been a tendency to see what is pathological. So anger can be a pathological expression of a diseased liver, and anger can also create a diseased liver. However, anger is also an expression of an upward energy, of tree energy. So by itself, it's neither really positive nor negative. It just is, and it needs to be. That upward energy, spring, I like the word in English, spring, springing into being, springing into action. It does need to happen. So there is, we could say, a neurotic aspect that can arise, but there's also a very creative aspect. Creativity, birth are all positive aspects of that tree energy that needs to exist as well. So the season is spring. The movement is upward and outward, just like a tree. And let's not forget that tree roots are twice as big as its crown. I think it's important for us human beings to remember, because we tend to do the other way around, to have a crown or a head that's twice as big as our roots. And that's where problems come. And of course, in organizations as well, and you can conjugate that in many, many ways. A tree to be solid needs very strong roots. They're not visible. They're not as visible as the flowers and the fruit, and they are totally there and very important. The taste that is associated to that energy is sour. And sour, actually, if you look at the definition of acidic, it says sour, okay? The characteristic of an acid is its sourness. So acidic, sour is a taste that corresponds to liver energy. The sensory organ is the eyes, and the emotions can be irritability, anger, patience, generosity, creativity, or apathy. Apathy, how do you say that? Apathy, yeah. So depending on the health of the liver. So I think you can see how deep and how much there is to say or to ask. Because when I was in school, I was often frustrated. I don't like to learn something by heart without understanding it, so, and I think a bit like children who ask why, why is the sky blue? Why this, why that? And often we dismiss it, and unfortunately we forget to ask why. And in my Chinese medicine studies, I would say, well, why is the taste acidic? The taste of spring or the taste of the liver. And I was not very satisfied with the answers. So what I'm sharing with you is really has been the journey to deepen that interdependence and to kind of extract the juice that we can out of it to guide us, because what the ancients left to us is a map of the world, an energetic map, the most the densest and smallest that it could leave us. But then it's up to us to open it, to unfold it, and understand it. And when still today, when I teach Chinese medicine, I tell people, don't learn by heart. Take it, of course, it's the basis, but then a bit like, in Buddhism, we say, don't just believe, make sure that things that you want to learn, you understand, or they make sense to you, or they speak to you. Maybe not completely right away, but that they resonate with you, and that you make a vow to continue deepening that knowledge that is transmitted. So today, where I'm going to focus is on the taste of sour and acidic, which is the taste associated with liver. A small drawing first. Sitting, I don't know if you can see as much as I do, but really it's a tree image, right? You see that, look at as the head is smaller than the roots. The base is twice as big as the head. So I think it's a good image of practicing that tree energy, with the upward spine. The spine is a tree as well. And, to make sure that it sustains us, and, being quiet to make sure also that the head is not overheating. So it struck me as I was preparing this that, yes, sitting is a tree image, as Great Tree reminds us. So what is acidity? So acids have a positive, I don't know if ion is the right way, maybe proton of hydrogen. We're not going to go into chemistry. You can breathe, but that's the definition of an acid. It has a positive proton of hydrogen, and a base is the other way around. It has a negative, meaning it doesn't have the ion of hydrogen, which is why they neutralize one another. So what we know about acids is that they produce heat. Okay, and think of hydrogen. Hydrogen, interestingly enough, is the first element of the periodic table, meaning it corresponds to the beginning. And liver energy, spring energy, is the beginning of manifestation. And it produces heat. It's an upward energy, potentially explosive, which we have as human beings. We have use that since we have the hydrogen bomb, the nuclear bomb. It's also the taste of young growth. You know, if you take a fruit that's not ripe, it's more acidic. If you take a young piece of grass, it's going to be more acidic and not as sweet as what grows in the summer. All right. So it's the taste. And why? Because acidity also gives us heat and gives more resistance. When fruit and food becomes sweet, it spoils more easily. And it's not as resistant to shocks or to transportation, which is why, you know, for long transportation of bananas, for example, they are always picked when they're not ripe. Okay, so there's a resistance. So for young growth, that's a condition of their growth. It conducts electricity. And so, interestingly enough, we can say also that liver energy in Chinese medicine includes what we call our nervous system in our modern terms. It's transformative. It's very important in digestion. We need acids in our stomach. We need acids in our organs for transformation, meaning it has a very high power of transformation. It's also very corrosive of metals and stone. So as you know, maybe, for example, in Rome in particular, I know I read about this in particular in Italy because they have so many old monuments that go back 3,000 years and so on. Well, they're having troubles because the rain has become so acidic that it's corrosive of the monuments. It erodes the stone and the monuments. And in France, we have that problem with our cathedrals also. They need to be touched up regularly because they suffer from our acid rains in particular and the pollution, which is much worse than what has been in existence for several hundred years. So you know the importance of the acid-base chemistry. And let's say that as a civilization today and our health today, we tend to suffer from over acidity. Our environment is over acidic. Our food is over acidic. And therefore, we tend to be overheated. So we, as people, we have, when we say overheated, means heat, inflammation, that's the same word. So as soon as we are over acidic, we are in an inflammatory state. It can be a low-grade inflammation, but it's a latent inflammation, ready to burst and potentially explosive. All right? So, and I'm going to continue with that, but and so even our climate, overheating. And there is a naturopath in France who has made a name for herself by giving method to cool the body. She says that our temperature is actually too high today, and that I don't know exactly in Fahrenheit, but in Celsius, we think that 37 degrees Celsius is the correct temperature. And according to her, that's a bit too high. We should be more like 36.6. And so it's just one example, and she's gotten some very interesting results with that. But that's one example of how many doctors or, who talk about chronic inflammation, there's that sense that we are in a state of overheating all the time because of over acid environment, food, and thoughts. Also, we'll come back to that. So acid rain comes, as you know, industrial emissions, vehicle emissions, some natural sources too, like volcanoes and, fires. But of course, we also have big fires today, like what happened in Australia, California. So there's more today, or at least there's a combination, let's say, of all those factors. It alters the pH of the soil. And when the soil is too acidic, there's not enough magnesium and not enough calcium, which are more alkaline in nature. Our water becomes more acidic in our rivers. As we know, we have lots of unwelcome growth in our rivers, and we know that there are very few rivers today. I don't even know if it exists actually today, a river from which you could just drink water. And think of it in water. For example, there have been studies of the Thames in England, and they found that there were traces of anxiolytics, antidepressants in the water of the Thames. So our choices of food, our choices of health, our choices of medicine do end up in the water. It damages leaves and bark and interferes with photosynthesis and resistance to disease. And that's true of us. When we are over acidic, we don't have much resistance to disease. Our immune system is lowered, and it creates structural damage. Same thing for us. When we are over acidic, our bones, osteoporosis, arthritis, these are all, and we know that with our teeth, that are eroded also when there's too much acidity. So basically, when we are over acidic, which is, I would say, pretty much everyone today has to deal with that because our environment is over acidic and we're interdependent. We are, so none of us can live in a bubble. So over acidity basically means a diseased liver. Excess liver yang, excess liver heat with weak roots and weak base. So, and that's why, I know for me when I sit, when, there's a sense of well-being, and I think it's coming back to that base and that root, because most of the time our head is bigger than our root. There's a cellular level dehydration because trees do play a huge part in cooling the atmosphere. So, and they actually, I read that in the Amazon forest, they talk about floating rivers because trees sweat, and especially mature trees, they sweat a lot and they produce water, which goes into the soil and hydrates the soil. So when our liver is dehydrated, we suffer from, our tree is dehydrated, we suffer from dehydration at a cellular level. And it's not just a question of drinking more water. It's a question of everything we do, everything we eat. It's, again, interdependence. We suffer then from an inability to relax, overheating with inflammatory responses and chronic low-grade inflammation, so it tends to be a bit like we see in overheated environments, there's always a risk of fire, a risk of inflammation, something that comes back, whether it's a flu, whether it's some kind of chronic disease that flares up, gets dormant, flares up again. That's typical of inflammation. There's also instability because the tree is not anchored. So we go from excitement to discouragement, upward, downward, upward, downward, and a weak immune system. So that's in nature and that's in us. So what are acid-forming foods? I don't think I'm going to teach anything new. I've been saying that many, many times here. Sugar is probably top of the list in terms of acidity. As we know, with children, we tell them when they eat sugar, careful, you're going to have, you're going to have, your teeth are going to hurt. And sure enough, when we are overacidic, the body needs to compensate by leaching calcium out of our teeth and bones. So sugar, I think, is really a worldwide drug and has the effects as bad as drug on general health of the population today. Meat is overacidic too, and of course quantities make a difference, but by definition, basically because they don't have wood. They don't have fiber. Wood is fiber. Dairy products, no fiber. White flour products, no fiber. Coffee, sodas, processed food. Grain and beans are also slightly acidic. So that's why, for example, in the Japanese tradition, when we cook beans, we put a piece of kombu, a piece of seaweed in it to make it more digestible and less acidic. So it's a good idea to do that with grain too. Okay, and that's why also we put a little bit of salt in the food to counter the acidity. Of course, it has to be good quality salt and not just sodium, a bit wet, a good quality sea salt. Basically, when foods don't have wood, when they don't have fiber, they are acidic. Stress, speed, anger are all acidic also. So the alkaline forming foods are rich in magnesium and chlorophyll. So green is the color of liver and spring. They are rich in fiber. So that means if they are rich in fiber, there's a slow digestion. So that means the food can really benefit from all the acids that are meant to digest that food. And magnesium is also the iron that is at the center of chlorophyll. So it's at the center of chlorophyll, just like as red, and hemoglobin is iron is at the center of hemoglobin. And let's not forget that we have at our disposal, and we don't take, at least I can certainly speak for myself, forget to take advantage of it, or I forget about it, that our saliva, what the Daoist calls nectar, is a natural well and hydration. We said it's the nectar that comes from the kidney and the stomach. So it is alkaline. Saliva is alkaline. So it has many, many benefits. And when we chew our food, when we make sure that we mix our food with saliva, it becomes less acidic. That's an important function. It has other functions. It's full of, it helps with toxins and many, many other aspects. It's great to hydrate us. So, for example, in some native tribes, it's well known that if you're thirsty, you put a stone in your mouth, a clean stone, and you move it in your mouth, and that it will draw some of that natural, a bit like you go get water from your well to hydrate your mouth, especially people who live in the deserts and don't always have easy access to water. So, and for us, that's an important part of at least compensating to some degree for the acidity in ourselves. Of course, we can also pour acid rain on others, and we all have the experience, I think, to have had that sensation of acid rain being poured on us. I'm thinking, for example, when we're enthusiastic about something and we go to someone full of enthusiasm, and the person just either makes a remark or makes fun or whatever, and especially with children, it's easy to do that. They're so genuine, with their happiness and their excitement, and it's easy either to make fun of it, or to have an acidic comment. So, and of course, we also do that. So acidic thoughts are the thoughts that keep turning around, turning around, turning around, turning around, and that end up creating an acidity in our system, through the repetition of the thought. And when we repeat a thought enough, of course, it changes our mood, it changes our energy, and we identify with it, with the thought or the emotion that it has created. So aggression and anger, irritability are forms of acidity. I would say again with anger, though, that it can be used not against others, but in ourselves. It can be used because it's that upward energy. So I know I had a teacher, a Japanese teacher, Michio Kushi, who very rarely, I never saw him get angry. He was very, very patient. And, also in Asian cultures, anger is seen as, as losing face. Anyway, he rarely got angry. And he told us that there was one time when he got angry was when he saw how people who were suffering from AIDS were being treated in New York, and how they suddenly became people you could not talk to, touch, and they were isolated. Basically, they became like, what was that disease in the Middle Ages? Leprosy, like the new leprosy. And so, but when he felt that anger, he did not let it consume himself, or, he did not do acid remarks or anything like that. He just got to work, went to New York, and talked with some of the people there as to how they could help. And I think we have many people in our modern history who do that. So it's not so much that upward energy when something is shocking, that kind of righteous anger that can come, but it's what we do with it, whether we let it, turn around, or whether we choose a way of action that will take care of it in a positive manner. And it's anger, but it can also be coldness, indifference, lack of communication or refraining from compliments. When, like, again, when a kid or a friend, is happy and we don't say anything, we all have the experience of the cold shoulder, either experiencing the cold shoulder or inflicting cold shoulder treatment on others. That's a way of aggression and acidity, of negating someone or making sure that the message of anger or irritability in a very passive aggressive way is received. So acid rain has many many ways of manifesting itself through stirring conflict, creating fire, waging war, revenge. All of those are, that upward energy, tree energy, which can go in either way, toward life or toward destruction. It's constantly that choice. Eroding basically tree energy in others, meaning eroding confidence, creativity, or initiative in others, being stifling or being stifled. Those are all effects of what I call acid rain, or effects of over acidity in thoughts, in behavior. So I'm sharing that. As you see, it's very short presentation, but the contemplation that I like to invite you to do from that, and what I invite myself to do also with that knowledge, the contemplation: if my liver is a tree, how do I take care of it? If spring is my liver season, how do I take care of it? So meaning that spring corresponds to our liver. So what are the teachings of spring in terms of liver health? We talk a lot about liver detox in the spring. And yes, it is good. We know that it's a good time to cut trees and to clean the garden, to make room for new growth. But I think that liver detox has become a bit of a marketing ploy for supplements and stuff. And I see too many people who go on a detox from one day to the other, not preparing really well, and then coming back to their usual way of being afterwards. And that's totally useless. And I would say even damaging, because we create shock on the body. So if we do a liver detox, I often give the example that when we read about fasting, whether it's in Buddhist texts or in Jesus in the desert, they didn't do a liver detox. They didn't do that to lose weight or anything like that. It was a spiritual endeavor of meeting with oneself, of contemplating oneself, of being face to face with one's dragons or demons. And that's what a true liver detox has to be for new growth. If it's just a question of taking a couple of cups of herbal tea that are good, sure, or even a fast. A fast needs to be prepared. It cannot be done just when we work. We need to create space around it. So I see that a lot with my students too. It's liver detox. Every year comes back to is a topic. So this year I didn't want to talk about liver detox, but it has its place for sure. And we need to be ready for it, to make room for it, to have goals for it, whether it's health, spirit, emotions. We need to really make it a spacious experience. I see people, who go work and then they don't eat and then get very weak because they go to work and they answer the phone and they look at their phone. That's not a liver detox, and it's damaging. All right. So if a forest lives in me, how do I help it thrive? If the trees are the liver of our planet, how do I respect them? How do I come back to my base to avoid overheating and pouring acid rain on myself and others? How do I weave interbeing through my everyday choices? This spring is liver, forest, trees in me. And I think that this knowledge, this beautiful wheel of medicine, is inviting us to do that. So I'm going to stop here, and we have a few minutes, and I would love to hear from you if there are any thoughts, any that come to you from this acid rain, acidity, liver energy, comments, thoughts, anything.
Thank you, Liliane. This is Genjo. I have something that came to mind when you were presenting on the wheel and talking about the liver and wood was its connection to anger and resentment, and I think shouting.
Mm-hmm.
And my head kind of went to just our kind of general political kind of scenario right now. And there just seems to be kind of an excess of those things at the surface. I know maybe there's always latent things, but the shouting in particular. And I was thinking about, I think last year was the year of the wood dragon, and I think this year is the wood snake.
That's
So,
correct. Yeah.
well, yeah, okay. So I was just thinking about like that kind of Chinese medicine, wheel of medicine perspective in terms of, this is a kind of a general big picture question, but in terms of what's happening kind of politically, if you have any kind of insights there, or I guess some questions that I have are like, what's the medicine for these times? What would you recommend? What are you kind of seeing? I know it's kind of a
Yeah,
big
that's big. Well, let me see if I can give a few phone calls to our politicians and let them know what they need to do with their liver.
Yeah, right.
But you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, and I think your question contained the answer. There's no doubt that this overacidity, this sick liver, is in our planet, in our politicians, and you only have to see what they eat, what they drink. And I know that a friend of mine who gives lots of massage to famous people, and he said, you wouldn't believe the number of them who are on drugs, and cocaine in particular being a drug of choice because of, the power. So, and there's no doubt that given when you see the intensity, the rhythm, the speed, the anger, yes, it's diseased livers, and you see it in everything, in the way of eating, the way of drinking, the way of behaving, and we see it in the, again, interbeing, the way we treat our planet is the way we treat one another. And you are right also about the wood dragon and the wood, for sure, it's a very strong wood energy right now. And Shouting is part of it. And, you know, when it says shouting again, it's the pathological aspect, you know, the diseased aspect of liver. Otherwise, in a benevolent way, liver energy is actually very generous, very gentle. But when it's diseased, it's also a very neurotic one. You know, so I guess in terms of what we do is what you are doing, what Tejo is doing, what I am doing in my own way when I teach is again and again coming back to the basics and that interbeing, that what we eat is what also we become, that the way we treat our planet is the way we treat ourselves. And, you know, that wheel of medicine that shows us that everything is interconnected. And acid rain, yes, it's an aspect of sickness in our planet. It's acid, it's trees, you know, the way we cut trees, the way we cut our forests. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You had you said it yourself, you know, it's a very good observation.
So next year is the year of the fire horse.
Ah, that's another
Someone-
one.
Yeah, someone told me that there's gonna be a lot of turmoil, which I'm like, okay, yeah, I see that coming. But
Yeah, wood. Yeah, you know, wood comes to fire, meaning, you know, again, it's the potential. Wood is kind of the how do you say, the material that you burn to create the fire. So, and horse is very fiery animal too. I mean, again, it has nothing is negative or positive, but it has the potential. Just like the bomb, you know, the nuclear bomb is a result of hydrogen, and hydrogen is necessary for life too. So there's always those two aspects. Yeah. So sorry, continue with that, Tejo.
well, what I was thinking, and you kind of answered it in what you just said, but is that this is, you know, the fire horse follows the wood snake is part of some kind of cycle.
Yes.
And so, you know, it seems like maybe it's our reaction. Are you saying it's our reaction to that particular kind of energy that creates balance or imbalance? Is that kind of what you're saying?
No, I don't think so. I think that basically, you know, we have a choice. Again, it's always those energies are not destiny. There's no destiny planned for us. It's just like, you know, spring is not a destiny. I mean, it has certain characteristics of nature growing. It's part of a cycle. But depending on our health, we can have a wonderful spring, or we can suffer from allergies and pollen. And, you know, it can be for many people, spring is a very miserable season because the immune system is not well. So it's not the energy itself, it's what we do, how prepared we are. Like in Chinese medicine, they say each season we harvest what we have planted the season before. So how we prepare, so the fire horse, if I say, well, it's potentially very explosive, is because of where we are. You know, I don't know. Right now in France, I mean, it's amazing. There's not a day when they don't talk about preparing for war. You know, the government just issued a new savings program where you put money toward the war chest, and it's on the news, you know. And so slowly getting people used to that idea. You know, we need to prepare for war. We're preparing for war. So in that context, when we talk about fire horse, it's, yes, it's potentially really very dangerous. There's that very fiery energy, over acidic energy, overheated energy everywhere. But it's not inscribed, it's not within the energy. If we were in a different state, it could be a very beneficial time. You know, a bit like summer can be a beautiful season that's a result of spring. The fire can be beautiful or it can be destructive. So it's always that. So it's not, and I don't know if I answer your question, but it's not inscribed as destiny or that it has to be that way because the energies are like that. It's how we handle those energies, how prepared we are, how aware we are.
$11
Yes, it is time. Well, thank you for spending that time with me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It
Let's
was
give back the
wonderful.
merit. May the merit of this practice
May the merit of this practice
benefit all beings
benefit all
all
beings
beings
and bring peace.
and bring
bring
peace.
peace.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to you.